Hello and welcome to the Best Overall Show, Episode 2. I am Jim Vesal, your lovely, humble host, and I'm joined today by my good friend David Koszka. David, how are you?
Hey, how's it going? Doing just great.
Fantastic. All right, so on today's episode, we're going to be talking a few exciting things. So, big topic for the night is going to be painted. David does have a chair. It's going to be judge painting versus rubric painting versus player scored painting, and we're going to have a big long conversation about it because we're big into that, and I think me and David both have some pretty strong opinions. We also want to talk about the Dark Eldar release and the preview that we saw last week, so that's going to be part of the show as well. We're going to be reviewing our best and worst Black Library authors and our favorite book. So hopefully it's not going to be too bad, but we obviously both have read quite a bit of Black Library, and we're going to have quite a bit of things to say. And then lastly, we're going to be having a little bit of discussion on moments of sportsmanship that have turned into friendship. So, got a super exciting show for you guys today. David, how are you? What's been going on?
Dude, doing great. Just been painting a bunch. Spring season for climbing has started, so I've been out in the woods a lot, painting some custodes. So it's been a good week so far. Thanks for
Amazing.
asking.
How's your? Is it nice weather out in Buffalo yet?
Yeah, actually, I mean, if you regionally, people are gonna be like, oh, it's like 60, 70 to 60 degrees. Oh, but like I've been wearing jorts for like the last week now.
What are jorts? I have no idea what jorts are.
Jorts? They're jean
Oh,
shorts.
jean
Come on,
shorts? We
man.
just call those shorts in
Yeah.
Canada. I don't know what are you talking
No, we
about.
call them jorts now.
All right. Enough about your charts. All right. So before we get going, there's a few things we're going to talk about, but I just wanted to address some comments I made on last week's show. So first of all, I wanted to apologize for the audio. It was our very first episode, and we are still kind of figuring out a lot of tech. So on behalf of David, who is
It's
too
not a
low, and
we.
me, who
It
is too
was a me
loud,
problem.
I want to apologize for the audio. Hopefully, for those of you watching right now, the audio is better. Give me a yes, audio is good, or no, audio is horrible in the chat if you guys feel like the audio is not working for you, because we're still trying to figure it out. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. Second, obviously there was quite a bit of discussion around the events at Clutch City GT, and I just wanted to clarify my comments just quickly, not because I think there was any drama involved, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands specifically one important point, which was, and as follows, that most of my commentary and everything that I talked about in regards to the Clutch City GT, the whole conversation we had around cheating and lists and stuff was really based around future events. I talked about it on my solo stream on Monday, but in the specific instance at Clutch City GT, I actually think the TOs made the right call, and the whole reason I brought that up is because that incident spurred on the larger conversation. It's not because I actually thought the TO specifically made the wrong call or that I thought Sean Naden didn't deserve to win. Absolutely, he deserved to win. So I just wanted to clear that up before we got into any deeper conversation, because I think there was some confusion that people were thinking that I was saying Sean shouldn't have won or that the TOs had dealt with it wrong. I think given the information in the scenario, the TOs actually did exactly what needed to happen. And I know Colin McDade was the TO there, and I think he did a great job dealing with it as best as he could. My whole point was moving forward, what do we do and how do we address these issues? And first time announcement, in order to have that discussion further, next week I have our very first guest, all the way from sunny California, the big man himself, head judge of the LVO. Some of you may know him as Salty John, but John, and I got to pronounce this correctly, Wiremuller is going to be on the show tonight, and I know how to pronounce that because I asked him specifically. So John Wiremuller is going to be on the show next week, and he's going to be our guest, and we're going to have a big discussion about judging, the role of judging, how he got into judging, where we think the whole thing needs to go. So I'm excited to have him on the show next week, and we're going to try to continue bringing you guys some really exciting guests moving forward. All right. So yeah. So hopefully, so come with all your questions. If you guys have questions for John, or you want to call him out on some of his, memes that he puts out, because he is a bit of a meme lord. Please post them in the chat or the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys, and kind of, I'm excited to have that conversation. All right, so David, we kind of did some
Yeah.
intros last week. This is only our second episode, But one thing that
Yeah, yeah.
came up while we were having a discussion was why is the show called the best overall show, and what does it actually
Yeah.
mean? What does actually best overall mean? And I thought it'd be a good way to start the episode today, which is to talk about
Hmm.
the history of best overall, as far as I know, and maybe you have a slightly different history. What's up, Yoshi? How's it going? Yoshi's in chat. Nice, thanks for joining. So, so I wanted to have a little conversation around best overall. So, what is, I guess, what is the best? What is best overall to you, and like, where do you think the whole concept of the best overall award, or sometimes as it's known, the Renaissance Award, came from? Like, and kind of why do you care?
Honestly, I think like when people get really angry at GW, they do this thing where they're like, "We're not a game company, we're a model company." And I always think that people think it's like kind of like a scapegoat to like, not writing good rules or something. But I think about that a lot and I'm like, well, like we all started this game probably as youngins and we sucked at the game. We didn't really get the rules, but we knew all the models looked cool. And I think like a lot of us, we started off, getting into the hobby via the painting, the lore, the models, the base lasers, so have you. And I think there's like an innocence to that that also to this day, when they do their reveals, we're like, oh my god, did you see the size of that fucking sword? And we go crazy about
Right.
it. I think about that a lot. Like, we still have that in us. And I think like best overall still encapsulates that magic and that wonder of like you still love the game, you care about the hobby part, you love the painting, and you're like not a jerk
Yeah.
when you're doing it, you know.
Yeah, and I guess from my history, and I can't remember, David, were you an old fantasy player, Warhammer Fantasy player? Did you ever kind of play fantasy?
Technically
Yeah.
I had an all, yeah,
So
yeah.
so there's a for those of you that played Warhammer Fantasy, and I'll just warn anyone that listens to this show, I'm probably going to talk a lot about Warhammer Fantasy. I think probably in just about every episode I will bring up Warhammer Fantasy because I feel like it is like the source of all my love for all things Games Workshop, and it still holds a
Very
very
fair.
special place in my heart. So I'm gonna make a, hopefully not too much, but it's always gonna come back. I'm gonna be one of those old people always talking about the old days, and somehow Warhammer Fantasy will come into it. But here's the thing: before the kind of golden era of current GW, when like right now we're getting army books and codexes at a rate that is shocking for someone that was playing maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago. So back in the day, um, you would sometimes go 2 editions without getting a new army book. Sometimes we'd go an entire calendar year with one army book getting released in the entire calendar year because GW just didn't have the ability, infrastructure, team, whatever, to produce lots
Mhm.
of books. Okay, well, Jim, what are you talking about? Where am I going with this? Well, where I'm going with it is the game that used to exist back then is very different than it is today. So today we have things like FAQs. We have things like army books getting refreshed, every 2 to 3 years, right? There's a much quicker pace of books being released, and as a result of that, and the game is a lot more balanced overall. Now, obviously, there's certain factions, I'd say that there's definitely certain ones that are better, both in AOS and in 40k. But in my fantasy days, playing fantasy was like playing Blood Bowl. So in Blood Bowl, you had your tier A, your tier C, then you had your S tier, and there were certain teams that were just bad, just like Blood Bowl, or certain armies and codexes that were just bad, and it didn't
Oh
matter.
yeah.
It didn't matter how good you were. Uh, and the thing is, the army building restrictions were a lot looser, so you could literally show up with armies of like 9 dwarf war machines or 18 beastman chariots, or there was no such thing as a rule of three. And so as a result of that, the generalship portion of gaming was not as like highly um, like praised because it was really easy. All you had to do is go get the top power list that would just steamroll everything. And if you own that army, you would just win the event, right? Like you could show up with your 9 dwarf war machines gun line or Empire gunline army, and you could just win the event with very little skill involved. And so back then, the idea that like generalship was like so important and so like I guess, praise just didn't wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing that like happened because everyone
Hmm.
knew that if you were playing, say, Dark Elves or Demons or one of the like top tier books, there wasn't anything special about you winning Best General. Like it just didn't it wasn't that significant because the armies were so imbalanced, and they were so imbalanced in fact that in fantasy we actually had comp systems. And what I mean by comp is uh, composition systems. And for those of you young bucks that are like, what is a composition system? Back in fantasy, you actually got three or four scores when you played an event. You got your battle score, which was for playing games, your paint score,
Hmm.
your sportsmanship score, and you got a fourth score called comp. And what comp represented was how grossly broken your army was. So if you got a high comp score, it means you didn't take the absolute most broken shit. And if you got a low comp score, it's because you took broken shit. And oftentimes comp would be judged by players. So like you would play a game, and then afterwards I'd say, David, your army sucks, and I hate playing it. 0 points for comp because it's just broken. You're taking all the good shit, so you're gonna get a zero.
Hmm.
And back in that day, because of this concept of imbalanced armies, generalship wasn't as important. And the way to actually win an event, you had to have a balance of comp, painting, sportsmanship, and battle. So you might go 3-2
Hmm.
or 4-1, but because you didn't take the most broken list and you invested in all these other things like painting and sportsmanship, you would win best overall. And so for me,
Hmm.
best overall has always been the most important, coolest trophy. It's never been best general.
Hmm.
And only since like 8th edition 40k for me, which I started playing, has this concept where that best general or the guy that goes 5-0, that is the highest award. And nowadays it's kind of reversed. That best overall is now like the Renaissance Award. It's kind of like the second place. It's not as cool. And best generalship is the number one award. Who won the tournament? It's not the guy that won best overall. It's the guy that got best general. That's what we mean when we say who won the tournament. So, what do you
Yeah.
think of the concept of best overall, David? Like, what are your thoughts on this? Because I
You
still hold it
know,
to high regard, but obviously I'm a competitive gamer now, so best general is more important to me now.
well, it's difficult because I like the idea of best overall. Like I aim for that award. I mean, a couple of years ago, I went to Du Bois and I won a game. I lost a game and I drew a game and I got best overall. And I got like shit on by a lot of people because they're like, "How did you get that award? You didn't even win all your games." And I'm like, "That's not the point of the award, though. It's because I painted a really good army and I was a really nice guy. Like
Yeah,
that has mileage in some events, but we live in a society now where like people don't. We live in a very big podcast centric world where it's not easy explaining a well-paid army. You'd be like, oh yeah, he had the wet blends on everything and the gemming and the direct source lighting. People don't. If you're listening to that, you're like, I can't visualize it, but you can be like, oh, this list, these strats, this combo, this matchup, and it's so much more digestible for people to understand. We're to the point where it's like you can tell a story about an event via narrative of who won. It's so much easier than trying to explain how someone who lost a game drew a game technically won the event. It just doesn't work that
right,
way. It just doesn't.
right. So I agree with you. I do think like obviously at the end of the day, I don't think it's like me being the competitive player now, best general is the most important, and that's how I view who won the tournament. But part of the best overall show is basically bringing back that spirit of what what it was to
Yeah.
be a high level competitor 10 years ago
Mhm.
didn't just mean you had the best
Yeah.
army. It meant you had great sportsmanship. It meant you had great painting. It meant you played a good, solid,
Hmm.
balanced list. And you still played very
Totally.
competitively at a very high level. And so that's kind of like the spirit
Mhm.
of this show that we want to do is really celebrating those areas of the hobby and trying to get everyone to feel like we want everyone to be a Renaissance man. We think the Renaissance man is the best, is the better man, right? And I think the
Yeah.
goal is to make or woman or other or dwarf or elf or whatever creature you identify as, chaos spawn. So our goal, I think, and my goal, anyways, with the best overall show is to kind of like try to create more Renaissance men and women and others. Like
Yeah.
that's been the goal, and so that's ultimately I think why I wanted to start the show, and hopefully we could take
Hmm.
every one of the guests on a journey with us through space and time. All right. Speaking of journeys, let's journey into our next topic, which is new and exciting things. So, uh, obviously, we had the Games Workshop preview this weekend. What did you think of it? Any thoughts? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are your initial thoughts? Anything that really stood out to you?
AdMech. AdMech Codex is coming, baby. Ooh, robots. I'm excited. There's that new HQ character, and there's a lot of people in the Skatari community that are like, well, AdMech community, they're like, that Skatari model sucks. And I'm like, dude, they're supposed to be meat wagons. Like, they're just meat and metal, and they're supposed to be just walk across deserts and die. Like, that's their job. And you think they would give them like embellishments? Mm-mm-mm-mm. No, they don't. GW knows that, so they made them very generic looking HQ character, which makes sense with what Skatari should look like. Sorry, getting that out of the way really quick. The new undead models are amazing, by the way. I'm really excited
Okay.
about those.
Brian says in chat, he says he's imagining me in a costume from Shakespeare at a tournament. You know, there's actually a event in Vegas, I think, called the Gentleman's GT, and like people dress up, and
Hmm.
there's an award for like most like civilized. Like I think it's called the Gentleman's GT. If anyone's been, can correct me. But like literally, people dress up in like suits and ties and like old Shakespearean it's almost like a cosplay slash 40K event.
Like
Yeah,
ruffle
ruffle
shirts
shirts
and stuff.
and like top hats with like monocles and stuff. Um, and I
Oh,
think so. If anyone's been to the Gentleman's GT, let me know. I think that's what it's called. And I think there's actually an award given for best costume, like most gentleman or gentlewoman like costume.
most
Yeah, most
dapper.
dapper. So maybe one day that's gonna be in the future. So I agree with you. As usual, I'll have a few hot takes. So my first hot take is the video that they showed to like so like when they started the AdMech video, I was like literally hands on my desk. I was like super excited. I was like, this looks so cool. We got thunder hammers. There's like this crazy video. It's gonna be all sorts of stuff happening. And then it was like just this one random dude. And I was like, oh. I was expecting like Thunderhammer wielding like super robots because like the video was like so hype, but then it was like just a dude with a walking stick and like a little pistol, and I was like, that was the most like disappointing. Like the hype video to the model was the biggest like gap, I guess. And so yeah, so I was a little bit choked. And then the other thing,
You know,
go ahead.
the Imperium needs a Death Guard release too. Okay, we need that too. We don't get all Space Marines all the
No, no,
time. We get a few Death Guard
no, I know.
offers.
I'm fine with the release. I just thought it was funny how
Yeah.
like there's like a huge like discrepancy between the hype of the video and the actual model. Like
Mhm.
for the video like that, I would have
Okay.
been like, oh yeah, they're gonna get like AdMech cavalry war robots with like giant thunder hammers. Like that's what I was expecting. And then we got like this little dude with like a little. He's got like he doesn't. It's not even a hammer. It looks like a little cane in his hand, like a little like walking stick. So that was a little
A Rod
disappointing.
of Command.
And the as far as the vampire count stuff, I agree with you. It's beautiful, and of course, you know why I think it's beautiful, guys, because it reminds me of Warhammer Fantasy, because it's got that like old,
Fucking Blood Knight,
yeah, it's got
dude.
that old classic aesthetic. And I think one of the coolest things about AOS is the design space. So you get like things like the Luneth, the with like crazy like flying fox dudes. You get things like the Deepkin. You get dwarves in spaceships, basically. I love all that crazy stuff, but what I really like is like the classic stuff. So I love things like classic vampire tropes. I love the stuff that just reminds me that it's like this could have been released for fantasy on square bases, and that's kind of like what I loved about it. So I'm so tempted to play AOS sometimes because the models are just they're so
Oh,
beautiful,
I
but
know.
I don't have time for two systems, and also until they get rid of the double turn, maybe they will with AOS 3. But now I feel like it's been around for so long that um, it's like kind of
Players
part of
are
the
just
game.
got used to
And
it.
actually, I assume there's gonna be lots of people that are gonna disagree with me and say the double turn is super critical. And maybe we'll get one of those guys on to make that argument. But I digress. Anything else from the preview that stuck out to you?
Um, Trying to think. Oh, dude, Redemptionists.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I'm a big Necromunda guy, and I have loved like when the Outlander supplement came out back in the day for Redemptionists. Oh my god, just like chainsaw. Like you put a flamethrower on anything. Put a flamethrower on a hat. Put a flamethrower on a chainsaw. Put a flamethrower on a flamethrower. I don't care. Do it. Um, yeah, that release is awesome. I'm also curious to see how they're gonna retcon Redemptionists because they're supposed to be like the dudes who are too pious to be religious, like in society. but now they seem to be more like elite
You know,
looking. So this would be
if Games
fascinating.
Workshop didn't have a history of retconning things like two global campaigns, I have Terror Storm of Chaos. If anyone's listening, I would be a little bit worried, but their ability to totally retcon stuff without ever addressing it means that I'm not worried. Like they will
Yeah.
retcon it and then just keep going and assume just pretend nothing, like they didn't just retcon two giant global worldwide campaigns and not say and like not even address it. So I have no fear that like that's gonna
Oh,
be a thing.
dude, the fluff they've been building for Necromunda has been amazing. If anyone's a Necromunda player, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're not a Necromunda player, every single faction now is getting their own book. Every single quarter is getting a new Necromunda supplemental
Right.
book. So like last year it was like 3 different factions, and this year they're going to do 4 more factions. But each book is going to be like a expansion upon the faction a lot. Like you're gonna get like your own like hired mercenaries, you get specialist troops, different armories. Like it's really awesome, and the fluff gets expanded a lot.
Yeah.
I just finished reading the Vansar House of Artifice book, and it is awesome. It makes me want to build more Vansars. Sorry.
You know what's really sad about
Mm,
I had this observation the other day. There are now more plastic ganks for Necromunda than Aspect Warrior plastics.
that's fine with
Pour
me.
one out, pour one out for
Don't
my
even care.
homies in the
Nope.
Eldar, but there's more plastic Necromunda kits than there are plastic
I
Aspect
waited.
Warriors.
I
And
waited
I
too
just was
long for
thinking about that. I'm like,
Necromunda.
how has that happened? Like, who dropped that ball? Give us the plastic Aspect Warriors, God damn it.
One box.
Yeah.
Make them all.
All right. So speaking of other new releases, what did you think of? Have you seen the new Dark? I'm always gonna call. Look, Imperial
Oh
Guard is Imperial
God.
Guard. Space Marines are Space Marines. Dark Eldar, Dark Eldar. I refuse to call them Eldari or Drukari
Hero guard.
or Adeptus. Blah 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 blah. Okay, or they're gonna be Sisters of Battle, not Adeptus Sororitas. Okay, so leave me alone. So what do you think of the new Dark Eldar rules? And have you seen them?
Um, so I've seen a lot of the preview ones that we saw from last week. I haven't looked at a lot of the YouTube reviews of the book
Right.
yet. I've been mostly spending my time poring over the new night rules and the new AdMech rules that are coming out from the
Right.
Caradon um campaign book.
Hmm.
So I think this is more of a hot take on your part than mine,
Yeah.
if you know more information than I
I've
do.
definitely read the whole book. They seem very strong. I think they're very fast, very strong, very hard hitting. Brian's asking if we're okay with Dark Elder being OP, and I actually generally I wouldn't say I'm okay with Dark Eldar being OP, but I'm actually okay with new books being strong. And I think I'd always rather GW release a book that's on the stronger side than on the weaker side because, as we saw with things like Iron Warriors and like some of the more broken stuff, GW does tend to, if things are out of control completely, they do have.
Iron Hand.
Sorry,
Iron
what did I
Hands.
say?
You said Iron
Oh God,
Warriors.
I think it's a
And
Freudian slip. My brain's just so wrapped up in the thing that I'm wishing Iron Warriors were good that it replaces them. Um, anyways, sorry. I'd much rather GW release something slightly stronger that's interesting that has lots of variety in play than release something that's like super
Mhm.
lame. Because in there is precedent for them nerfing things. Have you ever seen them come back to a weak book and be like, guys, we really missed the mark on this book. Here's some extra rules to make your army better. Has that ever happened? No. The only thing they've ever done is nerf.
Great.
So I'd much rather them be slightly stronger than needed. Uh, and also because like it really must really suck to be like a Dark Eldar player and get like a downgrade, right? So
I gotta say though, Grey Knights did get a really big boost with their
yeah.
supplement.
So
So I mean, that's one time GW handed out, and Custodians got good in Spider. So those
right,
are
but
two good boosts.
I mean I think everyone's gonna get a boost when their supplements come out. I don't think that's like I'm just talking
Gene
specifically
Stewart
Codex.
called
But
those poor.
they haven't gotten their ninth edition Codex though. That's what I'm saying.
No, but like their expansion set, the Gene Stealer
Right,
expansion was absolute garbage.
right. Well,
And I'm a fluff player, and
Gene
I'm
Stealers are
saying,
just in a bad place. Okay, so all right. So that's kind of my thoughts on Dark Eldar. I think maybe down the road, once the book's actually out and I've played a few games against them, I'd love to have a little bit more convo with them. What do we got there? A little buzzer. Forge Master Flex, thank you for following. We're trying to get up to 50 more followers. If you guys are watching on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, please make sure to follow us on both YouTube and Twitch. I know they're two different platforms, but we're going to be posting different kinds of content on each. And yeah, it's really helpful to the show. All right, current projects, David. Have you read anything this week or finished any models, or
Oh,
what have you been working on this week?
well, I just finished reading Pentinent, and if I know we were talking about briefly
Right?
last week, but I finally finished it, and yeah, my mind is extremely blown at this point because it is an amazing book, and you all should read it. Just saying.
I've also
Not
finished Penitent. Penitent.
yeah.
Okay, our volume's low, so I'm just gonna turn this up a bit.
Oh,
How's that? Is that better? Is that my too loud now?
you sound great.
Let me know if that's too loud.
Voice is like
Okay.
your voice is like honey on my ears.
Oh baby, tell me. Too loud? No, I'm too loud. How about that? Is that better?
You're fine.
Okay, damn loud. Everyone's saying damn loud. See, this is why
You
this is
are
why
a
we
lot.
love our guests. Okay. I'm gonna leave
Oh,
it here.
good.
Is that this is where it's gonna be if it's any like louder, you guys turn up your shit. All right. So I've also finished Penitent last week. We're not gonna talk about it today, but we will have a spoiler discussion on Penitent at some point in the future. I also finished 11 Death Drop Terminators, and now I'm working on 30 30 Poxwalkers, so to bring my total up to 50. So that's my next new project that I'm gonna be working on. Are you been doing any painting this week?
Painting. I started working on a random custodian because I left my painting box with all my important paints in the next town over
Of
last
course you
week.
did.
So I have to go back on Saturday to my friend's house and probably play a game of 40K and also grab my paint box.
What?
Also, Garner, if you're listening, I'm coming to your house on Saturday. Prepare a game of 40K for us, please. Thank you. But I finished two Cataphragm destroyers with plasma cannons, so they're both ready to prime. And I got two more of these Dino Bird Riders, aka Cerberus Raiders. One more is on the way. But yeah, I've been just working on some AdMech units, just chipping away at them.
Sweet. We got a
Most
shout out from one of the either Val or Falcon, but I'll say by the capitalization, it's most likely Val because the Falcon is much more calm. Um, yeah, 40K Stat
mm-hmm.
Center has said says hello to us, and I'm like, it's gotta be Val because Falcon is definitely calm. So
Oh, right
he,
on.
he
Vel Heffelplufer. Nice to see ya.
yeah. All right.
I miss you.
So and then games. Have you played any games last week? Did you play any games?
Zero. I was too busy getting this sweet streaming set up where I have a chair and a light now, and you can hear me better, so I don't have a poop voice.
That's that's good to know because yeah, as some of you may have heard or not heard last week, David was basically streaming across like three pizza boxes at his like webcam mic, and because he had a headset on, I didn't realize that his sound quality was so awful, and because I thought he was using his headset, but it turns out he was using his webcam mic, which was like sitting like 7 feet away. So the music was
Yeah, here's a secret. These don't have
oh
a
god,
mouthpiece or anything.
oh shit.
They're just
See, this
they're
is
just
I can't tell.
they're just ear warmers.
All right.
Yeah, this actually isn't plugged in. I'm just keeping my head warm.
So I played a game.
Yeah.
I played one game of real life 40K against Harlequins, which I won, which was fantastic. And then I also played a TTS game against the Germans. So I'm in the Greek Hammer event for Team Canada right now. We got walloped by the Germans. I played against a very nasty Raven Guard Ultramarines list, which I thought I could have won, but I just made a lot of mistakes and he just outplayed us. So Saturday morning, I'm going to be playing a TTS game against the Polish team, Team Poland, Team Canada versus Poland. So we are doing just like a scrimmage match with them. So I'll be playing that game on Saturday, and then we're also matched against Team England in the rest of Greek Hammer. So I'll be streaming both that game and the game against England. And then another cool announcement I have for everyone, which not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but um, I'm not sure if the WTC is happening. So we just had a question, guys, if the WTC is still going. I think they said they're going to make the final decision in April. My guess is if they, from what I understand, if they do it, it's either going to be very small, limited to like EU countries only. Because right now, travel from inside and outside of the EU is very difficult. It'll be like EU and maybe Eastern Europe. Basically, there won't be any international teams at the WTC if they do decide to do it this year, or it might be canceled altogether. That's my understanding. Um, So I just confirmed today, April 18th, I'm going to be streaming and recording a game with the guys that play on tabletop. So I'll be playing against Dark Angels, my Death Guard versus Dark Angels. So the episode probably won't be out for some time after that, but for those of you guys that watch and check out Play on Tabletop um, on YouTube, make sure to keep an eye out for the game that I'm going to be playing. I'm sure they take quite a while to edit those episodes, so it's not like the episode will be um, yeah, well, I need to get them on, and I want them to basically give me like all their followers. But yeah, it was funny because they just had a video where they're at like 150,000 followers now, and I was like, you know that I was the first video, right, guys? Like, I want a little bit of your that love, right? I only have 100 followers. So, anyways, so I'll be doing an episode of Play on Tabletop in April, playing Dark Angels. Hey, I'm still at the peak of my powers, guys. Come on. All right, so let's get into kind of some of the meaty topics we want to talk about. So first, what I want to talk about is Black Library authors. So talking about kind of getting into the background a little bit. So I think we said we were going to do top three, but I think we can maybe just pick our best and our worst, and maybe we can go into our favorite book and why. So starting with you, David. Who's your favorite, or who do you think the best Black Library author is based on?
Oh my god, it's so hard because okay, so like I've
Let's
been
say
reading Black Library
sorry,
books
let's say
since I was a
favorite,
child.
not best, because I think best is objective, whereas subjective, whereas well, they're both subjective. But
Yeah,
but if we
just
say your favorite,
split.
it's a lot more subjective, so you can't be wrong. Whereas with best, you can be wrong.
Well, with one I know I could be wrong, and the other one I know with assuredliness that I am definitely
Okay,
right.
so
I'll go with the one it's more subjective. First of all, I gotta say, Graham McNeil's Fulgrim is my favorite science fiction novel in the 40K
oh, it's
universe.
awful. Sorry.
You can no, it's a great science fiction novel. If you took it outside of the 40K universe, a 30K universe, it's still a great novel. It's all these ideas of humanity descending into madness, and it's a great idea of a
is,
story of like the first real like betrayal between
is that the
primarchs,
one
like
where
emotion.
sorry, when you say Fulgrim, is that Fulgrim in the Horus Heresy series or Fulgrim in the Primarch series? Because there's a Primarch series and there's a Horus Heresy book called Fulgrim too, isn't there?
Fulgrim from the Horus
Okay.
Heresy
I think
series,
there's two
the one
books
where you
called
like
Fulgrim or something like that.
oh well the OG
Okay.
one, the one
Gotcha.
where Horus and Ferris Manus are like oh god, the feels. Um, Great book. But I'm gonna go into my favorite author, and I just like hate it because I know it's gonna be like people are like, well, Dan Abnett. I love Dan Abnett, the way he writes 40K, 30K, um, his ability to say, um, his ability to write stories from a human aspect and making things feel massive and making things feel like you almost feel like the characters are in peril. And the fact that if you're in a human novel series like Gaunt's Ghost and there's a space marine, the space marine feels nigh immortal. And it's so cool to see how space marines interact around Imperial Guardsmen. And it's just like you see this power level shift that like how we always imagined a 7, 8 foot tall, transhuman spitting acid eating brains and just taking names. And then he goes to 30K where he can just talk about legions of space marines and it feels right. And also just like he understands creating massive battle scenes. You don't feel like he's missing a beat. Like you can really feel like there's something gigantic happening. I think it's really important in this universe in general because like we all like salivate at the idea of like titans fighting each other while like billions of humans melt under like sun-sized cannons like blasting holes through the earth, whatever, what have you. It's important to like be like, yeah, something big's happening, not just like three characters talking while the teeming ocean of human flesh beneath them is like melting, whatever. Like, sorry, I digress.
And
You go with
no,
your
no, sorry.
favorite.
Who? So did Dan Abnett write Fulgrim?
No, Graham McNeil
Oh,
did. Are you even
yeah,
listening,
but you said
Dan?
Dan Abnett's
Ah,
your favorite author. So your favorite
yeah,
book is
because
is Fulgrim. This is not by Dan
yeah,
Abnett, but your favorite author is Dan Abnett.
but my favorite.
See, I
Yeah,
actually have the
I
same.
also
I have the
love.
same situation. So I think my favorite author is Aaron Dembski Bowden, and I particularly like him because the Night Lords trilogy and the newer trilogy, the Black Legion trilogy called Talon of Horus and Black Legion, And if you haven't read those guys, if you're a Chaos player and you haven't read those, I highly recommend them. Um, the Night Lords trilogy is basically about the Night Lords in the current um, era, like right before the 13th Black Crusade, and it's like it just kind of goes in like how like messed up they are after Conrad Cruz basically like he basically lets himself die, and he was like such a emo kid that he like basically let the assassin kill him, and like that whole like thing like really fucks up his legion quite a bit, and it really like shows you. And so you follow this like these like basically slaves in this chaos legion for 3 books, and it really humanizes a lot of the even the chaos. Like Night Lords are probably the most like depraved of all the Chaos Marines, but somehow he manages to really write a lot of like story and character into the Marines, and like it really humanizes the various Marines, and you start to see their personalities.
Mm.
And then the newer series, the Black Legion series, it's basically it picks up like slightly after the Scouring. And for those of you that don't know, after the Horus Heresy, there's a time called the Scouring, and the Scouring is essentially what it sounds like. So the remaining loyalist Primarchs fend off the forces of chaos, and then they go on their own scouring of the galaxy to kind of get rid of and chase down all the remaining chaos forces and kind of purge them. So this book takes place sometime after the scouring, in between. So the scouring's over, and basically Abaddon's gone into full-on emo mode, and he's like hiding and just feeling sorry for himself. And it's basically the story of how he kind of comes back, starts the Black Legion, because the Black Legion again was started by Abaddon, not by Horus. At the time, it was called this. Yeah, the Black Legion wasn't until after the Heresy, and so basically, it's a really good book because it shows you like just like a lot of character in the chaos, like it, because chaos often is kind of caricatured as like evil mustache twirling bad guys, but I really like the way that he's able to give them character. Now, as far as my favorite books, I still have to go with my OG, which is the the Eisenhorn trilogy. There's
Hmm.
something about
So good.
his story in that trilogy that is 40k to me. It's the like the faith, it's the fall, it's the like the use of like demonic powers. It's like the scale of it, like the parade and Thracian Prime in the second book, which is like kind of like this crazy oh shit moment for those of you that haven't read it. It's like you read it and then you read it again and then you read it a third time because it's got that like level of scale, and then it's got the
Hmm.
intrigue and story that I really
Hmm.
enjoy. Like it's got so many different things to it, and it's it doesn't have the bolter porn, but it has it in a way that's like feels like there's like loss, characters die, people that like you cared about, they die,
Hmm.
like even, and there's a big time jump in between that trilogy, and then obviously it leads into things like Ravener trilogy, it leads into things like the current Beckwin trilogy with Prime Pension. So for
Hmm.
me, that that set of books, and I own those paperback from when I bought them in like 2003 still. That for me is like, if someone was like, "Hey, I don't know anything about 40k background, or I want to get into 40k, what
Hmm.
book should I get?" I'd be like, "Get the Eisenhorn trilogy," because it really gives you like a
Hmm.
very big, um, gives you a really big picture of like the broader 40k uh, universe. Horus Heresy is too much to get
Also,
to start someone on.
yeah. Also, it's really important. If you guys are you guys fans of the Eisenhorn trilogy? There was like a sleeper release that happened this past year. The Magos came out, which is a short story omnibus attached to like pretty much a full length novel that's in the Eisenhorn universe that takes place in different parts in the
Yes.
timeline. So I would definitely recommend checking that out because it helps fill in the blanks, like what happens when Ravener meets Eisenhorn for the first time, because there's a short story that goes into that that's really cool, and I think it's really important to like novellas. I think have always been a very important thing to me. I buy all of them, like for the Horus Heresy, obviously, and like the Forgotten Ghost, the Sabbath Crusade, like side books were really cool compendiums to go with that universe as
Can
well.
I make an admission? I've never read any of the Gonskos books.
Oh, fuck you, Jim! They're so good. They're so good.
I know. I feel
Oh, they're
bad.
so
I
good.
kind of feel like there was by the
It,
time I like thought about reading them, there's like so many books. I'm like, I'm just never gonna read it. So, all
the
right.
the more recent not as
Okay,
great,
so
but
next, worst Black Library book, or let's say written material, because it could be like
Jim, what is
so
yours?
worst and worst least favorite author.
Jim, what is yours? I'm so
Okay, so
curious.
my
I gotta.
least favorite book is called Damnation of Pythos. It's a book in the Horus Heresy series. I can't remember which book it is, but basically the I'm just gonna pull up the plot summary here. But basically, it's about a bunch of it's a 30th novel by David Annandale, and it's basically about a bunch of like random leftover Marines from Isfahan 5, Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders,
Novela.
and they basically end up on like an exodite planet, and they basically just fight dinosaurs for the whole book, and then in the end, nothing really happens except like they
Yeah.
just fight, and like literally, it's like dinosaur fights, Marines versus dinosaurs, like rumble, and then at the end of the book, you're like, how did like, and it's set in this like world that
What's the
you've never
point
heard
of
of.
it?
And at the end of the book, like they could have deleted the book from the whole Horus Heresy, and it wouldn't have changed a single thing. Because like you're like, cool, a bunch of like random Marines fight dinosaurs for a whole book, and then like I think most of
Yeah.
them end up basically dying. Spoilers. I'm
Yeah,
actually
they're all
I'm
dead.
actually well yeah, but no, because the reason I say because there is actually
Yeah.
a through storyline. Um, I think if you read what was the novella they just did? Sons of the Selenar by Graham McNeil.
Yes, Shattered
So Shattered
Legion.
Legions, I think it's the book. It starts with
Yeah.
like a bunch of the Shattered Legions, and like
Hmm.
Damnation of Pythos, it's like it takes some of the Marines or maybe a different set. I'm just looking at the names. I'm like, I don't think any of these guys.
It's
Yeah, it's like a
completely
whole new
different.
set of random
Yeah.
Marines that weren't in Shattered Legions,
Yeah.
weren't in Sons of the Selenar, that you haven't been following for a few books. Throws them against Dinosaur Eldar Exites for a book, and then the book ends, and like you're like, okay, but like nothing really happened. So that's my
Yeah.
least favorite book,
It's
and then my least favorite author, um, I'd have to say is probably now I'm gonna have to look it up because I gotta make sure I get it right. Otherwise, I'm gonna get it.
if you guys haven't read the Shattered Legion stuff, definitely read it. What's it called? The Seventh? Yeah, Seventh Serpent. If you guys like Alpha Legion doing Alpha Legion shit, read Seventh Serpent. It is amazing. Sorry, I
I
didn't mean
think it
to.
probably would be Gav Thorpe is probably my least favorite author. I feel like he just has such a hard on for Dark Angels, and like the books are just not good, and they don't make any sense. Like even the whole Luther storyline, I feel like just doesn't make sense.
He wrote that new Luther
Yeah,
book,
I know.
right?
I refuse to read it. So
I have
that's
to.
probably my least favorite. I don't have much more to say about how he sucks, but he sucks.
Oh, well, let me tell you why I think Gavthorpe sucks so bad.
Is
Because I got
is that
a
your least
whole
favorite
list.
as well?
Oh hell yeah, dude! I got a fucking bone to pick with him, man. Like, I'm a Raven Guard player, and he wrote the worst books in the 30K series, other than Damnation of
Pythos?
Pythos, or the fuck whatever that was called. And what was the other? What was that one where like the word bears made those like giant super ships in health,
Oh,
and then they like
Fury, Battle for the Abyss.
yeah, those two books
The
sucked. Those are the worst books in the 30K series, followed by all Raven Guard books written by him. The Primarch series Guy Haley book is actually really good, and you guys should read that one because it's actually cool. But the problem about Gav Thorpe is Gav Thorpe can't write scale. That's the first problem. He also can't write fighting because if you read how he fights, a great example is a Dan Abnett duel between a Gav Thorpe duel. So we'll just go to Solar War. I'll bring it down to Solar War.
Warning spoilers. If
Jagati
you haven't read Solar War, there might be spoilers here, so be warned.
Abaddon fights like the first captain of the White Scars. And it is like the coolest sword fight because Abaddon's like, I'm getting my ass kicked. He's like, I am so not good enough to fight this guy. But he, like, is a smart
He's got
tactician
plot
and
armor.
figures out a way to
He's got
not
plot
get
armor. What you
and
talking
not get
about?
murdered too. It's smart. Sure. But like when and also in that same book, Sigismund fights like overwhelming odds, and he goes like, "Oh, like Karn talks about this time where time slows down and you can just like read everyone's moves. So you have these great sword fight moments with like there's a Kublai
Yeah.
Khan. Who's this first cat? There's a
Check
not
out, I don't know,
Jagatai.
something con.
Oh god, I'm so mad I don't know this right now because he's barely
No,
in
I don't
any of
think
the
anyone
books. He's in
knows
like
it.
two books.
Like the Primarch?
You'll see it. No, the first captain of
I don't know.
them,
Jagat.
Jubai.
Yeah, sure.
Jubai. It's Jubai.
John Con.
Because in
John
Templar,
Con.
Jubai. Whatever. Anyways, him and Abaddon fight. It's really descriptive. You can really feel emotion. It's a very very it's like a very one-on-one, very intimate. Like you have like Sigismund overwhelming odds, just murdering punks, and it's awesome. But then you get the first wall, which is a book that Gab Thorpe writes, and it's the stupidest book. It's so dumb because the premise is just dumb. Number one. Number two, there's a fight where Karn the Betrayer fights Sigismund, and you're just like, oh hell yeah, this is gonna be baller, and it's over in like 2 pages because he's like, and then Karn had demon muscles, and then it was like a page of him talking about his demon muscles, and Sigismund's like, oh god, I can't fight this, and then they go like full anime, and Rogol Dorn like swats him with like a tank-sized chainsaw, and he flies like 100 meters away, but then like 3 pages later, Karn's like mauling everyone still. Yeah, I'm like flailing. And I'm just like pissed because you have like 100 good characters in that engagement, and he makes these fights just sound so stupid. Like there's no like intimacy, there's no like respect to the characters. It's just like stupidity.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
or the fact that that whole book is just
so I
stupid.
think I think one of the funny things, and I still don't forgive Gav Thorpe for some of the army books he used to write back in the day, because when he was on the games design team, he was an awful game designer, and between him and Alessio Cavatore, they basically broke multiple game systems with their rules writing. And like I just always thought it was funny how like a lot of these essentially novelists started as like they were like a store manager who got a job at like head office as like a rules Q&A guy, then turned into a design team guy, and the next thing you know they're writing novels, and they're like published novelists. Like, and that's not to say that they can't do that, like that it's not possible to go through that, but like sometimes I feel like their first like they got the like Black Library gave them a shot to write these books because they were already like writing rules, and like but like GW very rarely goes and gets people, like you can't have someone that isn't already embedded in the universe come in and write a Warhammer novel. Like it's got to be
Dan Abnett did a pretty
who?
good job though. Dan
Right, no,
Abnett.
but
He started off working with Marvel Comics and then
right, but
came
like
in
Dan Abnett, I think the thing is like, but look at his first book. What was it? Like some of his early books, like things.
first and only.
But here's the
It
thing.
was like
I don't
short
think you
stories
get
from
a I don't think you get a
no.
Gaunt's Ghost or an Eisenhorn if Dan Abnett is like the reason he was able to write those books that were so different. Don't forget, Eisenhorn and the whole trilogy is written in the first person. That's I think the only set of books in the entire range that's written in first person. So he brought in a very unique style.
Ravenor and the entire
Yeah,
series is
exactly.
written
But
in
that's
first.
I'm saying like that's a
Yeah.
very unique style, and I think, anyways, I think my point being is like sometimes, and like I look at guys like Graham McNeil, who I think, or like Phil Kelly. Phil Kelly's written a few novels, and he was like a nightmarish rules writer, and so I just always wonder. I'm like, it's not that they shouldn't be in those, they shouldn't write those books, but I just hope they get. I hope there's like a little bit of training involved, or there's some sort of education involved, so that they write better books. Is all I'm saying, or maybe they need better editors. But anyways,
One more thing I gotta say
go
though,
for it.
really quick. Gav Thorpe also wrote the Last Chancers novel series. Um, this past year, they released a new one called Armageddon Saint. Do not read it. I'm 100 pages in, and I still don't know why I'm still reading. It's physical labor to get through every page because it's that bad. I'm not even trying to be like exaggerative, but it's horrible. It is
If it
unbearable.
makes you feel better, I have never read any of the Last Chancellor's novels either. So,
You're not missing anything. I can assure
all
you
right.
that.
So I think that was a good discussion on authors. For those of you listening, let us know who your favorite authors or least favorite authors and favorite books are in the comments. I'd love to kind of hear what people think. All right.
Get a
So
pull
let's
start.
get into like the meaty topic. So I know we've had this discussion kind of on the side
Mhm.
before at events, and specifically, I think I remember had a big conversation with you about it at the Beef and Wing, one of the years where you guys were running the Beef and Wing Brawl. And
Mm-hmm.
for those of you guys that don't know, the Beef and Wing Brawl was a GT out in the Midwest, and basically
Northeast.
Northeast. Did I say Midwest? Isn't
Yeah, you
isn't that the
did.
Northeast? Isn't the Midwest like Northeast?
No,
Come
dude.
on.
Is it the Midwest for
What's okay?
Canada?
So what do you consider the Midwest? Like Minnesota? Okay, I don't know. That's basically
Like
Northeast, man.
middle
Come
of
on.
like
Okay. Anyways,
Colorado. Like
Northeast. All right. Long story short, um, David used to paint judge all the armies at the event himself. So rather than having a rubric, or rather than having like say player's choice or player's like favorite army that people would vote on, David would actually go in with his own criteria, and I don't remember, I can't remember exactly what it is. Maybe you want to talk about it a little bit more. And he would actually literally paint
yeah.
judge himself. He'd pick up your models, he'd go through your whole army, he'd paint judge. And for me, as someone that is spends a lot of time painting, I always was like, dude, I appreciate you because I think that's a lot of work, but B, I think it's the most superior system for paint judging, which is having an impartial judge, and not just any impartial judge, but a judge that's actually good at painting. And my argument always was that um, bad. So when I look at say I look at any model painted to a standard that's either up to how well I
Mm-hmm.
can paint or less, then
Yeah.
generally I'm gonna be able to tell how that was done. But when I look at something
Yeah.
that's done by the masters, like this is like Dave Caldwell or Sergio Calvillo or any of these guys that are like painting at a level that's just like so far past me, I literally cannot discern the the difference, the time, the skill level that goes into painting painters of that caliber. I just
Yeah.
can't do it. Like
Yeah.
both the painting blows my mind. And in that same vein,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes with player scored painting where players would go around, they look at the armies, they'd say, who's the best painted? It's the same thing except just brought way
Yeah.
back down. So now you have a player that maybe is not the best painter, and anything
Mm-hmm.
past a certain level, it's like he can't distinguish it from magic in his eyes. So for me, I've always felt
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
player judge painting it was a terrible way to score painting because
Mm-hmm.
people don't know how to uh, people just don't know what to look for. They can't tell the difference between a wet blend, a layer, and like a wash or a dry brush. And that's not to
Yeah.
disparage them. That's just to and it
Mm-hmm.
happens to me at the level that I paint, but at every level,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's there's a certain level of ability that you're able to kind of judge, I guess. So
Yeah.
I guess a question I have is like I think I just said I think judge painting is the best painting, but what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
What about you? What do you think? And what's the ultimate solution? Because I think in a lot of competitive events, if I said, hey, go to Adepticon or LVO and judge paint, right? Do you know what they do to LVO? They're just like literally, if your army isn't like a 9 out of 10, just don't even. We don't even want to fucking see your piece of trash. We're only gonna. It's like bring
Dude.
your army up if you think that it's like semi decent, and we'll judge those ones. And it's like literally a
Yeah.
guy walking by giving you like a ribbon. So obviously, judge painting is not the answer at an LVO, but like, yeah, like, what are your thoughts on this whole kind of paradigm?
So this is really important because we talking about best overall. Um, when I started when my club started the Beef and Wing Brawl, the intent was to create a GT level event supposed to be soft score heavy. It was supposed to be like 30% painting, 30% sportsmanship, 40% battle point. That was supposed to be like the draw of our event. But granted, like as competitive 40K got more and more popular, we had to start bending it to accommodate because it's just like,
People get mad.
yeah. And honestly, it's like when you're not getting paid to do this event and you're literally losing money every single event or breaking barely even, the last thing I want to do is hear like 20 people complain about your event. I'm just like, and then going to every GT that I go to and everyone being like, hey, 6 months ago you gave me a bad paint score. Fuck you, Dave. Ha ha ha. And they're like, just kidding, but I'm pissed at you. Don't fuck it up. I'm like, all right. And then multiply by like 40 throughout the year. Once again, TOs, you guys are awesome. Taking those punches. Anyways, because of that though, there's a two-pronged thing. I agree the idea that like, I want to have like overall be like the champion of the event, but also when it comes to localized events that are smaller, I want to use the event as a springboard to improve the community. And it's not only just like bring everyone together, but also like the hobby aspect was very celebrated.
Hmm.
And I created a paint rubric to help players increase their skills and work really hard every year and leading up to it. So I released my paint rubric earlier on the year. People could look at it. And I used to go to like every single store in my
Hmm.
region and just hang out with the guys. We'd play some games, I play local tournaments, and they'd ask me like, hey, this year I want to increase my paint rubric by 3 points. What can I
Right.
show me their army? And I'll be like, hey, here's the rubric. Maybe work on your highlights this year, or maybe
Right.
you can work on weathering or
Right.
freehand. And you use the rubric as a loose base way to help prove what they're doing.
Right.
I don't think it should be law because at LVO they did that, and I was livid.
What did they do?
I think you, I think you and I were both pretty pissed actually
What did they do? Explain explain to listeners what did they
because
do?
they just like ran through this rubric and they gave me like 15 minutes. Sorry, they were like running through because there's 800 players at this last year's LVO,
Yeah.
right? 800 players.
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a gargantuan task to paint score 800 armies. Like
Right.
that's like was it Herculean effort
Hmm.
there. Um, so they have to use a rubric and just fly through all your stuff. And they get to my army and they're like, what model is your model? What's your centerpiece model? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, which one's the better paint of all of them? I'm like, well, I paint everything to the same quality. They're like, that doesn't help me. And I'm like, I don't know, dude, this HQ character, I guess, because he's bigger. They're like, maybe you should have a knight in your list. And he walked away, and I'm like, what? And I got so confused. And then like day two, they did like day two paint judging,
Right.
and Jim and I walked up because we were like, oh, we didn't know if you saw our armies. They're like, what are your names? And then they were like, nah, neither of you are on there. And you and I were like, there must be a mistake. Excuse me, there must be a mistake. Can we talk to your manager, please?
Right.
But they were like, no, you're no, we don't have you. And you were just like, fuck it, I'm gonna go get drunk. And I'm like, good idea. And
Which
then
for spoiler alert, I did very much so. Okay, so that actually brings up you bring up two really good points that I want to talk about. So the first thing is the whole thing of rubrics, and I don't so like I don't hate rubrics. I like rubrics to a point, as a tool to essentially
yeah,
give players a little bit of guidance on like what kinds of things a judge might use, right? Like
yeah,
so for instance, if a rubric was released and said, here's some things that a judge will look for, highlighting, basing,
yeah,
etc. I don't mind that. I think that's fine because then it gives players an idea of the kinds of things they should make sure that they're doing, like belt buckles painted, eyes painted, these kinds of things.
yeah,
I really don't like the rubrics that require you to change how your army looks. So for instance,
yeah,
there was one that was like I think it was Adepticon and it was something like 50% of your army needs to be converted. Now, for you, I think that is easy because literally every model that you ever own and paint is paint converted. For me,
maybe,
I do a lot of converting as well. But
yeah,
and so as a chaos player, it's actually quite easy. But there's a lot of armies that it's not easy to do conversions, whether it's due to the models themselves. Like
yeah,
Eldar, how much conversion
oh
work
yeah,
can you really do to an Eldar army without totally scratch building models? And
yeah,
so then it feels like okay, or there'd be like oh like it needs to have some percent of freehand or some percent of X. And then what you're
yeah,
doing is you're saying, okay, so my army doesn't have that thing, but I'm going to
yeah,
go and add things to my army to make it so I can check a box.
yeah,
It's not because my artistic vision for my army wants me to do this. It's because
yeah,
I need to go check this arbitrary box and I want to get those points so that I can win the best overall. So in that sense, I don't like rubrics that
mm-hmm.
essentially force players into certain things. Where I
Agreed.
like the rubric is in that very initial screen where it's like, is your army painted? Is it based? You know, is it like three colors? Just the very basics that almost anyone that should have any sort of chance of winning best painted will check. And then anyone
Mm-hmm.
that like so that's why I don't like rubrics. The second point that you made, which I think is really interesting, is I don't like the idea that like like they're because of the rubric that you mentioned, like
Mm-hmm.
I thought our armies probably deserve to be in that top showcase at LVO personally, but obviously there's a subjectiveness involved there. But the thing
Yeah.
is, like, I don't I don't think that like whoever was judging that subjectiveness, if they're just going by some arbitrary rubric, or they're just going by their, let's say, subjective style preference. Like, you know me, we paint very differently. I paint a very
Hmm.
bright, high saturation, clean. Like you mentioned weathering earlier. I literally have weathered 3 models out of 3,000. I don't like weathering. I like all my models to look like they just came out of the car wash and that they're just arrayed for battle, like parade, like they look great. I don't
Yeah.
like weathering. I don't like dark, desaturated, grimy colors. You like that. Like
Yeah.
you have a very kind of,
Hmm.
very kind of textured, kind of realistic style with weathering, with like all these kinds of things. And like I think and I know as a painter and as someone that models, I know how much work you put into that. And so I can recognize that as someone that's
Hmm.
judging. And vice versa, I'm
Hmm.
sure you could look at my army and you wouldn't be like, well, Jim didn't do any weathering, so he put less effort in, right? No, you just say
Yeah.
his effort is in different areas. He really focused on
Yep.
his blends or his highlights. And then likewise, like there's certain things like I think I don't know if it was Depticon. It was like your army must have like banners or freehand and stuff like that. I'm like, again, there's probably certain
Out of
armies.
Tyrannus chat.
What are you gonna do if you're playing
You know?
Tyranids? What freehand? If you have a Tyranid
Yeah.
army, where are you gonna put freehand? Like you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like there's just no opportunities for that. Like so
Yeah.
I don't like those kinds of things. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess my point is I agree with you. In my so I guess the question is like, and then player's choice. I don't mind player's choice if it's a separate award, because why I like player's choice is because a really cool thematic army with like um
Mhm.
a lot of like cool conversions theme that's maybe not painted the best has an opportunity to win just based on like the rule of cool. That's why I like player's choice. But if we're gonna do best painted, or like I think that needs to be so my perfect system in here. I'm going to propose a solution because everyone's asking, Jim, you like to complain a lot, but what the fuck is the solution? So here's my perfect paint system. Okay, first there's
Oh,
two awards.
perfect.
There's player's choice and there's best painted. Player's choice is voted on by the players, and and I'll come back. I'm going to table that for a sec because player's choice has to be done whenever there's player voting. It has to be done right. And there's a big whole can of worms with player voting, but I'll come back to that. Best painted should be this. It should be a basic rubric that checks off, like let's say zero, like up to 20 points, and almost every army, as long as it's got like the basics, should get those 20 points. And anyone that doesn't get the 20 points is automatically kind of, and that's essentially the score that goes in your tournament score. Okay. Then for best painted, players that think that their army is at a level, and this is why I say the players, not a rubric, saying, because a lot of rubrics say, oh, if you have more than 25 points, come to us, we'll put you in the showcase. I think it should just be up to the
Yeah.
players. So if you're a player and you think that your army is painted at a level that could potentially win best painted, you can just put it in. There's no questions asked. And then of those
Yeah.
armies, and here's the thing, from my experience, at every event, big or small, realistically, there's 2 or 3 armies at a GT level size event. There's maybe 2 to 3 players at a major, like 120 plus major. There's maybe 3 to 5 players, and then an LVO size event, 800 players. There's probably like 10 or 12, 10 to 15 players that think
Yeah.
that they have armies good enough to actually say that they have the best painted army. So let those players come forth, right? Come forth, right?
Yeah.
Let those players come forth. The guys that think they have really nice armies, put their armies out there, right? And then anyone that doesn't care or doesn't want to be judged, well, then they're not going to put their army forth anyway, so there's no hard feelings. Then
Yeah.
once you have that smaller list, then maybe 1 or 2 judges go through and score those armies and determine the best painted armies. Okay, so
Yeah.
and that's not based on a rubric. That's based on maybe there is some sort of like subjective criteria. Like maybe they get a
Mhm.
score on various areas. Maybe there's a way
Yeah.
that like and I would prefer that portion to actually be done by like 2 to 3 people. So it's like me and you, David. Let's go through and have discussions about this small set of armies,
Oh yeah.
and we can probably, as good painters, come to a probably pretty unanimous conclusion on which one we think is best painted. Maybe if there is a tie in the
Yeah.
end, I think if I'm gonna roll with you as a paint judge and we say we come down
Hmm.
to the last 2 armies and we're like, okay, one of these is best painted,
Yeah.
then I think me and you objectively can say, okay, well let's look at really closely at the blends. Let's look really closely at the belt
Yeah.
buckles. Let's look really closely at how many mistakes there are. and then
Yeah.
we can make obviously it's subjective judgment of what we think is best painted, and that should go to the best painted. So that's my
Yeah.
perfect system, right? Because it I think it checks lots of boxes.
Yeah.
It makes everyone happy. It makes sure that you're
Hmm.
not forced to change your army or add things to your army just to fill some dumb rubric. But if you have a beautiful
Yeah.
army, if it's technically flawless and you think it is, and you just think, hey, your table was at the back corner of the event, and the judges didn't, which is like think about LVO, the judges didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to see it, and now it's not in the showcase, you still can go and just put it in the showcase, right? What do you think? What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
LVO was it was really frustrating because that's what they were doing in the morning of the first day of the 40K event. They were like,
Right.
if you want your army on display, bring it over here. I got into the gaming hall after they made that announcement. So like, if you're traveling via fly, I had to build a whole new display board. It was like a modular 1 foot by one. It was like a bunch of 1 foot by 1 foot like panels that built into like a structure, and I had to use it to like fit into my suitcase. I spent like 3 weeks building this fucking display case, and I get there and I missed that announcement, and I put my models up on the like at the table I was supposed to play at, and I'm like sitting there, and I'm like home dum dum, and everyone's like, oh dude, like did you get your army judged yet? I'm like, no, not yet. They're like, you need to go over there, and I'm like picking up like my modular like as I built it like at that spot, I like rebuild it, and the guy's like, I'm judging your army right now, and I'm like, whoa, I wish I knew, I wish I knew.
So
Like
that's
if if they gave you like if it was on the actual like agenda of like the players like packet being like 8:15 to like 9 o'clock we're doing like paint judging, I'd be like, good to know.
so
Not just like an announcement that I
I
missed. And I
think
was
you
like,
made an excellent point, David, and it goes back to this rubric shit, which is
yeah,
oftentimes you're giving points for display board, and
yeah,
I don't think beyond just having a display board, I don't think the
yeah,
display board should have any bearing on your paint score, because just as you said, you have a massive display board. If anyone's seen it, it's like fucking 2 by 2, like it's the size of like a giant Rubik's cube. It's huge. I have, oh yeah, yeah, if you can see on video,
and
yeah, it's
that's
huge. It's literally like you cannot put that thing on a plane, right? I also have a really nice
no,
display
you
board.
cannot.
I really have a nice display board, but when
Yeah,
I'm traveling, which is actually for most events into the U.S., it cost me when I was traveling in the 2019 season, I'd often have to I'd often have to check my display board, and the extra piece of, so I'd have my army case, my carry-on bag, and then maybe one more piece of luggage. So I'd have like my backpack with just like my essentials, my army case. Then I'd have to check my
yeah,
display board, and oftentimes you don't get like you pay for that. So it would cost me sometimes upwards of 180 to $100 each way just to bring a large display, like a travelable display board with me, one that I jammed in this fucking box. It'd show up all broken, like customs had ripped it open, and people in the local area would show up with like fucking lava mountain with like LEDs and strobe lights, and it's like, okay, well, if this is a display
yeah,
board competition, then I'm just gonna not care. So, but I think we
yeah.
could have a whole topic on display boards, so that's neither here nor there. Now,
We most
one thing
certainly
I wanted to
could.
talk about, and this is going out to
Mhm.
all the TOs out there, and I love you guys. And Nurgle Snurgle, thank for the follow, and or I don't know, a noise happened and I saw your name, so I don't know if you followed or subscribed, but thank you. Um, so thank you for tuning in. But here's the thing, and I want to, please, if you're a TO, please listen to me. This is really important. If you're going to have, I'm very passionate about the subject. If you're going to have any sort of player-based judging where players are responsible for judging other players' armies, there's two things you need to do. First, you need to make it mandatory that every player votes. Because at almost every event where there's this thing, there'll be 60 players,
People
and the
forget.
winning person got like 10 votes because it's the only person's friend. Second, the judging needs to all happen at a predetermined time when everyone is there, not during lunch, not in between games, not at
Or
the end
after
event,
the
not
day.
before the event.
Yeah.
There needs to be like, this is how it should go.
Yeah.
Round one, start. Okay? After round one, games are in. Okay? Round two, everyone go to their table. Okay, everyone stop. Now, go score. You have 10 minutes. Announcement. You have 10 minutes. Everyone needs to go to every table, and judge the armies, or we have all the armies that people think again, and they all need to be in one spot. So maybe before the event even starts, everyone does the army
Yeah.
judging. Because what happens at these events where there's players scored is two things. A, Jim gets put on table 90 in the back corner, and Koszka gets put on table 1 right at the front of the venue where everyone's hanging out. So I got to go pick an army for best painted. What do I do? Well, I look around. I say, hey, that's a cool army. Okay, cool, this one. Do you think I'm actually gonna? If most players don't give a fuck about scoring other people's armies, they don't. They don't want to have to even vote. Like it's not that important to them.
Yeah.
I always find it important. I always try to do put as much effort as I can
Hmm.
into looking at everyone's armies, trying to do a fair score, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But most players, for this is why I don't even. I think it's a dumb award to begin with because it's like most of the players just they don't give a shit. They're gonna throw away their votes. So I think there needs. So I just don't like the system in general. But if you're gonna do it, please make it mandatory and please set aside time for it to actually be done properly because what happens is once everyone's scattered across the event, people are not going to walk the entire hall to find the one army they
Yeah.
actually think is better than the other armies. They're going to find within whatever's within eyesight of the first 10 feet. Gamers are lazy, guys. Like, fucking spoiler alert, gamers are fucking lazy. They're going to see the first army that catches their eye that's close by. They're going to say, oh, that one's cool. Here's
Yeah.
my score. There you
Yeah.
go. Favorite army. See you later. And then like they're not even going to go to the past 20 feet of where they're already standing. So you get the situation where, or they'll do what sometimes happens where, hey, I'm here with my clubmates. Yeah, Jim has a great army. We're all just going to vote for Jim. Or David's here. We don't even need to go. We're not even going to look at the other armies. We're just going to vote for David, which is also
If
like
you want to know a secret about the gaming club I used to be part of, they all voted against me because they like trolling me.
great.
Really.
Well,
No, seriously. They'd be
it's
like, "Hey, by the way, Dave, I voted for that one." They actually mostly voted for you, by the way, at the what was it, the Basement Collective
because I'm
Open,
charming and beautiful.
the one in
I think you
Sudbury.
won that anyway, though. I
What's
think you
that?
won that anyway.
I won best paint and best
Yeah,
sportsmanship at that event.
yeah. So, anyways, so that's my thoughts on judge painting. So, just to summarize, judge painting with rubric, a judge combo rubric blend is best. Player scored is trash and should
Agreed.
not be used. And
Yeah.
if you're gonna do player score, make sure it's like a secondary event award, and make sure it's done in a way that it's actually like literally if you don't vote for player for another person's army, you get zero in the tournament. You get ejected, banned for life
Also,
from the ITC.
also really important thing, if you get judges, make sure they're good painters.
Right.
That's also very
That's
important.
right.
And if you also have conversion modeling and like sculpting based things, make sure you have a judge who understands like, oh, that's a converted model, and not just someone being like, I have 4 converted models, look at them. And then it's like, no, like the guy can be like, no, you have like no converted models. You're stop lying. That's like a head swap. That doesn't count.
No, but
You know what I mean?
so funny thing. In Adepticon, there's literally points for like having you have to have 50% of your army converted. So I'm like, okay, I have like 23 cultists that I've done like I've switched their like close combat weapons for an autogun because the cultist the set is like 50% close combat weapons and 50% autoguns. So like literally like 80% of my converted models were just like demon princes and then cultists with autoguns instead of close combat weapons. I'm like that one's converted and that
And
one's converted and that one's
banners.
converted
And banners,
and
dude.
banners. But I'm just like that's so lame. Like it's just like okay at that point why are you even bothering?
That depends on what depth you want to put into your conversions. I mean, if you like, want to buy Imperial Guardsmen or like, I mean, nowadays you got the new sweet Black Fortress cultists and be like, I want to convert these and then like hack off arms, sculpt arms, use the Vrax militia bits from Forge World. It all depends on how deep you really want to go. That's actually like a really important part of paint rubric to me is the the caliber of how deep you want to go and how expansive you do it per your army. Like if someone has a really beautifully painted Riptide, a Yavara, and like 3 Crisis Suit commanders that are beautifully painted, but like the rest of the army is like painted like bare minimum, and the guy next to them has the same situation, but like everything's equally painted, it's a no-brainer. I'll pick that guy. Or if the guy has like all of his models like a tiny step lower than like the guy's 3 really good painted models, I'll pick the other guy because I look at the entire army. And Jim, I think you will agree with me on that, is that when it comes to paint judging, don't just look at the shiny big model like a cool painted knight conversion. Look at everything that's around the feet of it.
Hmm.
Like look at
Yeah.
everything because I think a lot of people get caught up in like the razzle dazzle of like 3 big showcase models like strategically placed, and then they're hiding unfinished models behind
Right.
them, and
Yeah,
like
I agree. I think you can always tell the how well an army's painted not by the coolest, best, like most biggest point model, but by the goblin, by the cultist, by the termagant. Like those are the models that I look at the most, because
yeah,
if you look at those models and they're painted very well, then generally everything better than them is painted better. But
yeah,
oftentimes that's where people cut. People almost always put extra work into characters, put extra work into big monsters, right? But
yeah,
what we're really judging is as a whole, how's the army look? And if you look at any of my cultists, every eye is done, every belt buckle's done, every strap is highlighted 3 colors. Like it's like, and it sucks because I painted fucking 80 cultists because they used to be good and now they're trash. But I did it, and I'm proud to know that if someone walks by my army and picks up a cultist and looks at it, I feel good about it, right? I feel good
yeah.
about every model in my army that I've put on there. I know that I've put in the work. I've dotted my I's and crossed my T's. Did I get that right? I did.
Mm-hmm.
Good for me.
Go for
All
it.
right. So
I I can definitely say with some admonition
admonition.
that I've gone to events with like half painted models, and it's like broken my heart. Like my soul dies inside because I know that I didn't do my best. I didn't finish that last like tank at the 11th hour.
See,
I was ashamed of
I have a
myself.
very well. I used to have a very strict rule of not even playing games with unpainted models. And
Yeah,
now, as I've been more of a meta chaser, I've played games with like a few unpainted, but like literally, I didn't play for most of the entire, because back in the Warhammer Fantasy days, well, sorry, back in the day when I started the hobby, you couldn't actually play at Games Workshop without fully painted. You couldn't play unpainted at Games Workshop. That was their rule. And the only place we ever played was Games Workshop. So I came up with this mentality and attitude of always needing painting models,
yeah,
and you had to have painted
yeah.
to play at GW. So we used to paint everything so we could go play with it. And then at one point they decided, okay, you can just play unpainted, which I think for in the on the whole it's probably better for the hobby because it allowed people to actually just play the game, which I think a lot of people wanting to do. And obviously having a fully painted army is very intimidating, but
Mhm.
I think for me I still hold myself to that standard.
That's a Yeah. It's all you can do is lead by example at this point. If people are like, "That's a great painted army," I'm so jealous. Like, why are you jealous? You can paint your model
Yeah.
too. Like, it's just the amount of time you want to invest.
All right. Okay. So any other final thoughts on paint judging?
I'm gonna stop because I can just go into tangents. So I'm just gonna cut
This is
myself
the
off
best overall
personally.
tangent show as well, so that's fine. All right. So last topic that we want to talk about, and this is something that you brought up last week, which was thinking about kind of talking about sportsmanship a little bit. And I think one of the things that we want to always cover is sportsmanship. And was thinking about times where you've had moments of sportsmanship turn into long-lasting friendships. And
Yeah,
uh, I had to work really hard to come up with some examples because I'm a bit of an asshole for those of you that don't know me. I'm kidding. I don't think I'm an asshole, but definitely I just have a bad memory and usually I'm wasted at these events, so I don't often remember uh, moments of sportsmanship. But why don't you start, David? Because I feel like you probably have something in your mind.
Oh, I have a bunch. I mean, like, I always feel like I'd rather. It's about the merit. I think it's a topic I'd love the merit of winning properly versus like winning based on like a technicality or
Right.
a gotcha moment. And that's kind of like how this story began. It was my first time going to Adepticon. It was like 2014, 2015,
Hmm.
I believe. And I was playing like my third game. I was playing with an Imperial Guard army with White Scar allies, and I'm playing as a Tyranid player. And it hits the second turn comes around, and I'm like, I'm doing really good in this game. Like, I'm like, I killed a bunch of flyer ants. Like, I hold majority of the board, and I'm feeling really good. I look over, my opponent's like, just like is like pissed, and I'm like, what happened? He's like, it was like beginning of turn 3 for me, and he's like, I forgot to roll reserves for my termagants. I'm like, oh, how many do you have? He's like 60. I'm like, oh, roll it now, and he's like, oh, I got him. I'm like, all right, move him on the table. He's like, okay, and I'm like, all right, and he like moves on the table, and as I'm like moving my models, I'm like, you gonna run them? He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, you gotta get 24 inches is the closest objective. You need to start running now. I'm assuming, yeah, I would love to. And I'm like, then roll your run dice. So he gets a 6, and he moved 12 inches up the board. Turn 3 comes around. That's my turn 3. His turn 3 goes through. My turn 4 starts up, and he goes, shit. I'm like, what? He's like, I forgot to move all 60 of my termagants. And I'm like, do it. He's like, what? I'm like, don't forget to run. He's like, are you serious right now? And I'm like, yeah, dude, whatever. I don't care. It's like I already lost my first game. Like, I'm not here to like win the entire event. I already lost my first game. What am I gonna get out of this? I'm like, yeah, dude, go for it. So he rolls, gets another 6. He's 24 inches up the board with 60 Hormigons. And then it hits me that like during the course of this game, I've lost a lot of my army. And now I'm standing in front of 60 Hormigons. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think this through. And I got like devoured pretty bad the next turn. It was like the end of the game. And the game ended. And we shook hands. And that was back like what, 2014, 2015. My opponent and I, we still talk almost every other day. We do road trips together to GTs. And like, I don't know, even though he's now like a 40K superstar, I am just like, he still like really values my opinion, and we still chat like all the time about tech and gaming and hobbying. Yeah. And so like, because I let TJ Lanigan move 24 inches up the board in my first Adepticon game, him and I have been like really tight since then. And it's been like, I'm really happy that like sportsmanship won over my need to like win or be like, no, you made a mistake. Like, you sit there. I was like, what's the point? I'd rather have a good game where I lost based on a player making the right decisions that he knew he had, being forgetful because it was this third game and we both traveled like 10 hours to get to Chicago. Like, yeah, like I'd rather lose because I played against a good player. Like, and I'd rather I lose that way because of someone being tired and forgot something. I just rather have it that way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry. Sportsmanship story. I got plenty of them, but that was one of them. I really
No, it's a
appreciate
good
it.
story. And in my head, I was like, when you're like, I couldn't tell who you were talking about until you're like, yeah, now he's a 40K superstar. I was like, oh god, I bet this is TJ. Nothing, not in a bad way. It was just like, I just was like, I bet you this is TJ in my head. So it's good. It's good. So for me, I have a story, and this is actually about sportsmanship. Also, funnily enough, at Adepticon, and maybe Adepticon just brings out a lot of people. And this was the year that I won Adepticon, which was the last Adepticon that we had. And for those of you that don't know, Adepticon is the 40K side. It's two main events. There's a singles and there's a team event. And the team event traditionally has always been the most popular kind of. That's the headliner event, is the team event at Adepticon. And the 40K singles, it's 4 games on the Thursday. So 4 games, you're playing 4 games in a row. And then the top 16 qualifiers, so the top 16 of those 4 people, go and play another 4 games on Friday. So it's like basically full on Iron Man. And then it's 4 games of single elimination on the Friday. And then the Saturday Sunday is the actual team event, which is like 3 games per day, I think, or something like that. So it's like so
Yeah,
if you
it's three
play
games a
both the
day.
singles and the teams, it's like fucking
It's
exhausting.
3 and
Yeah, it's like
2.
an
Yeah.
exhausting weekend. So I played the 4 games on the Thursday, exhausted. Right at the end of it, you're just like, I'm dying, right? And then I go into Friday, and I'm in the top 16, and I play. My first opponent was actually my first game was pretty easy. My second game was like one of the worst games of 40K I'd ever had against Orc player. And then my third game, so I won those two though, even though my second game was like awful against this Orc player, who I will not name. But if you want to go look at the Adepticon pairings from 2019 and the BCP, you can find out for yourself. Just saying, information's out there. And then in my third game that day, I played Chris Blackham, who's just a legend from the South. He's from England originally. He's playing like a super nasty Eldar list. And you got to understand too, like for the most part, like we're having to crush these games because Adepticon famously doesn't believe in clocks. And at the time, this is 2019, so this is before clocks had been super famous. So Adepticon, they're like
Yeah.
rounds start weird times, rounds end at weird times. The TOs, there's like lots of drama about clocks and blah blah blah. So I'm playing Chris Blackham. We have a really good game that goes the full distance. I think it took the full 2.5 hours. So at this point, I've played 7 games in 2 days.
Yeah.
I'm like exhausted, and I'm now going into the final of Adepticon, and I'm like, this is like one of the biggest events at the time in North America, and I'm exhausted. I'm hungry. I haven't really eaten, and I'm playing Steven 4, aka Juice. Some of you guys might know him from Battle Brothers. He's on the Battle Brothers podcast. He's like plays with guys like Sean Naden and Brad Chester. I think he's out in that group. And I was at this point exhausted. I was like so tired. I'd had like just like mentally exhausted, and I we introduced ourselves because like the TO was kind of trying to get us to keep to like play the game like right away. And I was like, can we just get like 10 minutes? Like, I just need to eat some nuggies, chicken nuggies, and like sit down and just like sit in a quiet room and just relax a little bit before the game. And finally, I got to meet Steve, and I went up to him and I was like, and we basically said the exact same thing to each other. We're both like, hey man, like I know this is the final championship game, but like we're both super exhausted. I was like, I just want to have a really good game and just like a really fun game, and I don't want to like lose my shit. I know it's a very high. This is the height of competition, right? This is the most competitive game that probably either of us play. We're playing the finals, top 40K finals at Adepticon, and he was like, dude, I feel you. We gave each other like a big hug. We're like, let's just take 10 minutes. Let's relax. Let's have just like a super chill. Like, and I was like, I don't want to got you. Like, let's make sure we just talk through the game and just have a really good, clean game. And we did, and we had an
Mhm.
amazing game. And like both throughout the game, like we were laughing, we were both so relaxed. It didn't feel like a championship game. And after the game, like same thing, like gave him a big hug. I was like, man, that was awesome. That was such a fun game. He's like, dude, such a good game, like awesome. And like for me, that was for me like such a like it was like two players at the height of competitive play, but recognizing that like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's still a game, and we still want to have fun. And I don't like I like unlike you, I don't live near Steven, and I don't see him and I don't talk to him that often. But when I see him at
Yeah.
events now, I fucking go up to him and I give him a big fucking hug. I'm like, dude, how are ya? Good to see you. Like, how's life?
Yeah.
Like I just he was such a good opponent. Just really lived up to the values that I would like every competitive gamer,
Mhm.
every person like. Dude, for years and years playing 40K, you hear win at all cost gamers, all this shady shit, all the fucking horror stories of competitive gamers. And for me, it was like it
Mhm.
was so important for me to play that game against Steven and to see that at the very highest level, at the finals game of like one of the biggest tournaments in North America, sportsmanship and the spirit of the game and treating your opponent with respect and having fun still rule the roost. And it's not about this, and like all those people that say competitive gamers are just win at all costs and like they'll do anything to win, like all those players can go fuck themselves, because what Steven showed to me and hopefully what I showed to him is that it's you can rise above that. And the good players, the good competitive players, the reason they win is not because they're the best, it's because they're able to rise above it and still be the best. That is what for me the best overall is. Like those are the players that inspire me and that make me want to be a competitive player. It's not like I don't give a fuck about your generalship. It's not about it's about how you did it, how you won, and having that
Yeah.
having that moment with Steven both before and after the game. It was like this is why I love this game. It's because
Mhm.
you can fucking play your heart out. We both played our hearts out in that game, and leave everything on
Mhm.
that table. And in the end, you can still give the guy a hug and say, "Fuck, that was so much fun." And it's 3 years later. I'm never gonna forget that game, right? And I hope he never
Oh,
forgets that
totally.
game. And so for me,
Yeah.
that's what sportsmanship is to me. It's like being sportsmanship is easy when you're 0 and 5,
Mhm.
guys. Sportsmanship is easy when you're on the bottom table. Having fun and not caring and being like blah 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 goofing off. That's so easy when well, it can be hard if you're losing, but in the middle tables, if you're getting whomped every game, it can be very hard too to be positive and be happy. So
Yeah.
props to all the wooden spooners out there. But when you're playing in the middle tables, I'd say it's a lot easier to be a good sport and have the gimmies like, oh yeah, don't worry, move your thing. I've already lost a few games. Don't worry about it. That's a lot easier in
Yeah.
those games than it is in the fucking championship. To be like, hey man, we're in the
Mhm.
finals, but you forgot to move this model. Go ahead and move it. That's when you're tested, right? Like they say, like there's uh, courage only happens in the presence of fear. You know what I mean? Like so it's like you can't be courageous unless you're scared, right? It's not courageous to be like it's not courageous if you're not scared, right? And it's kind of like you can't be a good sport unless
Yeah.
it matters, right? Like unless there's opportunities for show you that
Yeah.
and obviously I'm talking about like rule stuff. I'm not talking about yeah. So anyways, I could go on about it, but that's kind of my story. So
I always feel like the people who are having the best time is like, if it's the last game and people are just screaming at each other, that's when you know you're like you like envy those tables. Except for I don't, because I am that person.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm really loud when I play at tournaments. I scream a lot.
that's true.
Only playing with a Valiant, because when you start harpooning things, that's when the game gets good.
Cool. All
Right?
right. Any final thoughts on that topic on sportsmanship?
On sportsmanship, yeah, man. I think it's just like it's not just like it can be really hard to lose gracefully, and I think that's something we need to talk about in the future. Is talking about the ability to lose gracefully. Um, I feel like I've hit a pretty good like Zen path on that. um, but it can be really hard when you're dealing with an opponent who is really like, cruel or does like dishonest things. But you have to take the bigger path than
Right.
all this. Like this is only like an hour. Like, I always look at it this way. We spend a stupid amount of money traveling, building our armies, painting, talking about playing in these tournaments and what have you. And then we get there. This is supposed to be like fun time. This is like your vacation. And if you're getting like mad stressed because of the higher competitive level, but like that stress shouldn't come from the fact that you have to like human relations yourself through a game
Right.
because some person's like, you're wrong, wrong, wrong. You're like rolling your dice like, good sir, I assure you that the rule in which you are talking about is thusly stated on this page. Please reconsider what you are saying. And they're like, wrong, wrong, you're dumb, you're stupid. And you're like, okay. It's like if you can get through those games with a smile on your face, like that's like the sport, like just get through those games and be the person that you would like to play against, I guess.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Any kind of final thoughts, David? Anything else going on in your life that you want to talk about or non-gaming related?
Uh,
You're going. You got some exciting stuff happening in a few weeks.
in a yeah, in about a week and a half, I'll be heading out to Utah. I'm gonna be snowboarding, climbing, hiking a bunch. Gonna be on an airplane. I feel like someone from the 1940s or 50s. That's like, hey, did you hear the airplane's back online? Let's go give it a try. I'm gonna wear a tuxedo on the plane because that's how people used to.
Nice.
Because it's now like, can't believe we're gonna go on an aeroplane.
Yeah.
Tim, you know about
Yeah.
that
Well, we don't have
aeroplane
those.
life.
I actually looked into because I'm starting
Yeah.
to see these events in the states, and I'm like, God, I gotta get down there somehow. So for those of you that don't know, I run a bunch of restaurants, and we have a restaurant in Portland, Oregon, and I used to have an L1 visa, a U.S. L1 visa, but I let it expire over COVID because I wasn't traveling. So I was like, what's the point of renewing it? So I was talking to our immigration lawyer this week. I was like, hey, like I was thinking maybe getting my visa renewed for work so I could travel for work purposes because I'm thinking, okay, well if I have the visa, maybe I can travel freely as essential work to the states and then sneak a few cheeky tournaments in. And yeah, it's gonna be like $2,000 USD to renew your visa. And I was like, and then $500, like $2,000 for the lawyers, and then like another $500 for the actual application. And in the past, my work has paid for it. Um, but I don't know if they're gonna spring for it this time. So I might be stuck up here until the borders actually open, which is unfortunate.
I cannot wait to have Canada again. I miss coming up to your wonderful country.
Yeah, and we miss beating you up here. In other news, I think I mentioned my play on tabletop news, so that's exciting. But yeah, I don't have much else going on. I got this cool thing. This is kind of nerdy. This is for those that can't see. It's like my Canada Post like business card for Duplicity Paint Studio. So some of you guys might know I'm doing a little bit of commission painting on the side, and so I got this thing and it says company name and it has like my company, which so apparently I own a company now. Which is funny, really funny. Hopefully the CRA, which is Canada Revenue Agency, doesn't watch this video because I haven't actually registered them as like a real company. I've just been like taking the money that people have been paying me. So please don't use this in a future lawsuit. I'll probably cut this out of this, but anyways, I will. I am going to register so I can write off a bunch of business expenses. I wonder if they'll let me write off like my paints and my hobby stuff. I'll be like, yes,
Oh,
I
definitely.
needed another 100 poxwalkers for the purposes of client retention. Um, yeah, write that off. So
Actually, you can. You could actually write off a lot of what you have as expenses,
right,
even like your rent, because it's now a studio or like an office space
nice.
for you.
All
Yeah,
right, so for
you can,
next,
and your car.
all right, so I think that's everything for the show today. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. If you guys can,
Yeah,
please make sure to like and subscribe us on both YouTube and on Twitch. And if you want to give us your Bezos bucks, feel free to throw us some subs on Twitch as well. Next week's show, it's going to be me, David, and John Weiermuller, head judge of LVO. We're going to be talking judges' roles and events, active passive judging, codified remedies, that kind of stuff. And also be talking about some of the new stuff coming out for next week. So, with that said, any closing last words, David?
you're gonna have to give me a glossary description of what those words just meant, because those are
Absolutely,
a
I will.
little. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for
Yeah.
listening. And we will talk to you guys next week. Hopefully, I don't screw this up. Have a good night. Bye bye.